Welcome to the first ever episode of the Fourth and Goal podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Drew, along with my co-host, Rob. Say hi, Rob.
How's it doing, everybody? Rob here.
So, Rob and I met about 2 years ago, just shy of 2 years ago. We were doing school together, actually over in the UK. I'm Canadian, he's American, but we both love football and had been talking for a little while. We ended school, we living far away, and this is something we wanted to do to kind of keep interacting with each other.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of things I thought would come out of school over in England, but I did not think an American football podcast would be. And that is the last time I will refer to it as American football, because this is football, baby. Let's go. The National Football League.
Exactly. It was really weird for that year having to refer to football as American football. Very weird, very wrong. It's football and soccer. Figure it out, people. The English made the name. It's their own damn fault.
Well, what I will say is soccer refers to one sport. Everybody knows what soccer is all over the world. But when you say football, there's a lot of different footballs. So That's one thing that I got to give credit to the word soccer. And they got to adopt it and get rid of football, give it back to what really is the National Football League's word.
Exactly. It's because the British used football for every sport. They were like, what's rugby? It's rugby football. What's soccer? It's association football. What's that game? Oh, it's cricket football. I don't know. Like, they just use football for everything. That was just sports.
At least we're bringing the real football back with those London games.
Yeah. Honestly, though, those, like, NFL Europe games are going huge. It's not a long time until there's a full European division in the NFL.
They pop. So the London games, because I was trying to figure out who they're marketing to. They're marketing to the millions of Americans that live in London and or the vicinity, right? Like, you go and it's just every football, you ride the tube on the way to these games. And it's just everyone like me wearing like random jerseys, not for the teams playing. Same with like Germany. It's all these like American kids who like parents were military or whatever. And like, it's wild. So I agree. It's going to be fun, especially for those of us that spend a lot of time overseas, catch a couple games in Europe. I would say within the next 5 years for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy that they sell out Wembley Stadium. And it's a lot of Americans. But, you know, the British actually are starting to really like football, and the Germans too. It's wild how much they are starting to like it. And it's really going to be good. Get a global game. I'd love to see non-Americans in the NFL, because that's the one biggest issue with the NFL is you got like maybe half a dozen Canadians and like two internationals that are like converted rugby players, and everyone else is American. I'd love to see the talent pool get a lot bigger, like what we've seen in the NBA in recent years with all the Eastern European players who are now dominating the league.
It's true. And well, the NFL is actually making a push for it. And there's a program trying to get talent out of Africa that we'll explore a little bit later on this show. But let's go ahead and kick it off, Drew. Just as a quick introduction, I live here in Mexico, where they do host a couple games a year. I think two now, definitely one. And there are, again, jerseys all over. But this time, it's very much a local passion, which is great to see. I'm a Steeler fan, as everyone can see. I'm from the Bay Area originally, though. So I also support a lot of the Bay Area teams. My father is from Pittsburgh, hence the diehard loyalty to the black and gold across all sports. My mom's from Cincinnati, so I got a little connection there. And I went to UCLA, so a Bruin fan, and we'll be following, well, what used to be Pac-12 players. Really no longer there, but...
Yeah, the Pac-12, the Pac-12 is an absolute mess right now. I mean, we could do a whole episode on the bullshit that's going on. But yeah, so I live up here in Canada. I'm right near the border with the U.S. I'm about 2 hours away from Detroit, which is what makes me a Lions fan. I'm also 2 hours away from Buffalo, so I do have a soft spot for the Buffalo Bills. Growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, you know, it was nothing but sadness. I was just after the 4 Super Bowls for the Bills, and neither team has been good basically my entire life until recently. So football's starting to get exciting for once.
I thought you meant just sadness because you lived in Canada, but, you know, that's a different part.
Whoa. Not cool.
The first of many jabs, listeners.
Yeah. What you'll know is Rob and I love to jab nationality on each other. He is as diehard American as they come, and I'm as diehard Canadian as they come. So that'll be a bit of a theme going on. And judging by the fact that probably most of the people listening to this podcast will be American, I'm sure the comments will be on your side.
Definitely. So where are we kicking it off, Drew?
Yeah. So we're going to move into our first segment, just what's in the news. So talking about some of the things that we've seen in the news. The one thing I want to talk about, did you see that the Colts are allowing Jonathan Taylor to seek out a trade?
Yeah. Honestly, I kind of love – I hate the fact that there might be a chance where we don't get to see Jonathan Taylor play some football for a little bit, a la Le'Veon Bell when he held out with the Steelers. Yep. But I do kind of like – Irsay being Jim Irsay, right? And being like, you know what? No, I'm not paying running backs. I'll find another one, and kind of like sticking to the party line there a little bit and just like, fine, go entertain a trade. I like Jonathan Taylor being like, pay me, right? Like my span is limited to make money. I'm performing regardless of if this team's going to make the playoffs. I'm the best player and pay me. And so now he's entering the market, and I don't even really like who's playing for him. Like who's in the market for where does he want to go? Like I can think of teams where I think he should go, but whether or not they're even in the talks, who knows, right?
Yeah, it's really tough to know who's in the market for like a top tier running back, because who is willing to pay a running back who basically is out of contract by the end of this year, pay the asset price. Yeah, had injuries last year. I don't know who's there, but the one thing I will say, Jim Irsay is the last guy who you want to get on his bad side. Jim Irsay is the nicest guy to his players. Like Reggie Wayne, like he hired Jeff Saturday last year. Why? Because he's Jeff Saturday, and it's like he's a Colt legend. I'm gonna give him a job. It's like Peyton Manning wanted to be an offensive coordinator, he'd be hired tomorrow. Like Jim Irsay.
Marvin Harrison shot up like half of Cleveland, and Jim Irsay still never said a word.
Yeah. Jim Irsay, if you're one of his guys, with Jonathan Taylor was very close to being, like Jim Irsay will love you forever. But when you burn a bridge and you try to fuck Jim Irsay, that man will go down with a blaze of glory. And that's what we're seeing right now.
What does that say about the state of running backs in the league and their financial situation moving forward? Jim Irsay taking a stand like this.
I mean, the running back position has been going like this for years, really since Le'Veon Bell. And watch. I mean, it's not just him. It's like Le'Veon Bell held out and it didn't work out for him at all. And then you have like Melvin Gordon, who did his whole holdout, and then you literally just watched as Austin Eckler became one of the best running backs in the league as an undrafted free agent. Yeah. And you're seeing a lot of this, and I think that's really hurt the market. But that being said, I think there are running backs who are worth it. Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, these are guys who get paid, and I don't think anyone who owns them is upset they're paying them for the production they get. I think it's the running backs who are just, you know, they don't have a very specific skill set. They just put up stats, because you can stat pad as a running back. But, like, you can't replicate what Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey do, because there's no one else who does it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of two things. One, running backs are a bit like Marines, where once you send them over the hill and they get hurt or they don't return or they break down because it's gonna happen, there's just another Marine ready to go, eager, young, to fill his shoes. And so that, and the short nature and the physicality of the position, is going to make turnover and has always made turnover at the position just a fact of life. And now that's being monetized accordingly. But it also has to depend on whether the team's in contention, really, right? Like, if you're a team in contention, then a Christian McCaffrey or a Dalvin Cook or somebody like that coming to your team can make a world of difference. But if you're the Colts and you're essentially kind of you are rebuilding, and you are going to spend franchise money on a running back when you need like a plethora of solid guys to form a foundation in which you then add a running back to go get that money out of. And so I think that's where Jonathan Taylor's losing a lot of leverage here with the Colts, is they're just like, yeah, fuck it, leave. What's our win? Like, what's their win ratio going to be different maybe 1 or 2 games that he wins them. Maybe he was hurt all last year. Maybe
Yeah.
not even 2 games.
And it's not even that. Like, I think the thing is, while the passing game, you need a quarterback, you need a wide receiver, and you need some time. The running game, the entire whole is the offensive line. And running backs want to be paid like they are the guy that makes the running game tick. But realistically, they're at most 1/4 or 1/5 because the offensive line and tight end are such a major part of that running game working on every play.
Well, here's a good example. I just mentioned the Marine analogy, where it's like if a starting running back, like when Zeke gets hurt, they go ahead and put in Pollard, and he goes off and runs 100 yards and scores a touchdown. Whereas, like when a starting left tackle gets hurt, like the rest of the game's in jeopardy.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like, that doesn't happen like that. If that's any indication of where the pay needs to be, and they score touchdowns, so of course they're famous. They're in fantasy lineups, right? All of that I think drives a lot of the narrative where they get seen. Their visibility is higher, and therefore
Yeah.
they want higher paychecks.
Yeah, it's the visibility that's it. Now, I 100% do believe that their market has cratered to a point where it is a bit absurd. The fact that punters on average get paid more than running backs, though I will acknowledge that's a bit of a dump stat because that's not including like the bottom of the roster running backs that people are just paying league minimum to. But like a good punter actually has
And how
value.
important the field position game is. Like, let's not undervalue the punter. I was trying to get him added to my fantasy football league recently.
Okay, one, that's wild. But two, I agree. Punters might be the most undervalued position in my opinion because if you can pin a team back, like, a perfect game from last year is when the Vikings beat the Bills. Now, I know this wasn't a punt, but the reason the Vikings won that game was because Josh Allen was pinned back, couldn't just knee the ball.
Half year line, right?
And it's like, if you can pin a team back, like look at the statistics on how much less likely you are to score being within your own 5 compared to being at like the 20 because your playbook is so reduced. You can't take a sack. It completely changes your game. So if you can pin a team back, the value that creates is, I don't think fully seen by NFL teams.
You know who sees it though is Bill Belichick, because I saw an interview with him once where somebody asked him a question about why they roster a long snapper, like given this, why this hyper specialization still exists in the game, and no, most people Bill Belichick gives like a 30-second answer to. He went on for 17 minutes about the development of the long snapper and special teams and like the possessions and how it's like war a little bit and battle and all this.
Yeah.
And like if you think about it up front, like cavalry, and it was like, and the reporter like pretty much shat himself because when does Bill Belichick ever go into that? But he was naming like long snappers by name and everything. But anyway, so we're getting a little away from the Colts. Just quick, fast, two destinations you think JT ends up at?
God, I mean, the Patriots would have been a perfect option, but they just signed Zeke, so that's kind of the cards. I think Josh Jacobs is planning on coming back, but if Jacobs doesn't come back, I see a world where the Raiders might try to make a move for him because they just signed Jimmy G. They got rid of Derek Carr, not because they're trying to rebuild. I think they can win with this team. Like, that seems to be where their thought process is. I don't agree with it, but if that is your thought process, that's a potential destination if Jacobs doesn't come back. Another team out there, and it seems crazy, but maybe the Miami Dolphins, because Miami Dolphins kind of have a lot of, like, mediocre running backs. Like, I think they have like Mostert and Chase Edmonds. But
Yeah,
like,
they have a bunch of like guys you would fringe second start RBs on your fantasy team.
exactly.
Jeff Wilson Jr., I believe.
but they've really been prioritizing just offensive weapons. Like, they went out and bought Tyreek Hill. Like, they went and drafted Jalen Waddle when it was like, get an offensive lineman for Tua. Like, they are getting weapons. Mike McDaniels loves to work with a bunch of weapons. I could see them going for another weapon. Those are two off top of my head. No research. I'm sure there's a more obvious one out there.
Yeah, I also haven't done any research. What would scare me, but I think would be great on their team, the Ravens. Jonathan Taylor feels like a Raven to me a little bit. I'm not sold on J.K. Dobbins at all,
No.
Or Gus Edwards or whoever they have back there. And then the other team I think could use them, but I don't think they have any space, is the Bills. He feels like a Bill running back a little bit. No one trusts the guys they have. Zach Moss and Singletary aren't like. They might have signed somebody this offseason.
No, I think I think Moss and Singletary are gone. They got
they both left. Who's starting in the Buffalo?
Dalvin Cook's younger brother.
No way.
James Cook. Yeah. James Cook.
Oh yeah. He did well though at the end. He came on at the end of last season.
Yeah. He's decent. He's a young, cheap running back.
Taylor to the Bills. They could use someone like him.
I mean, because just in general, the Bills need offensive players. And I know that sounds so weird thinking about how high-powered their offense is, how good a team that is. But outside of Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen.
And Davies making, he's streaky. He's like a streaky three-point shooter.
Yeah, but it's like outside of literally those two guys, there's not an offensive lineman of note on the offense. There's not a second receiver. There's not a running back. They did draft Dalton Kincaid in the first round, but like
Austin Knox doesn't scare anybody.
No. It's why it's so It's why I think Josh Allen's one of the best QBs in the league, frankly, because
regular season.
Dude, look at Josh Allen's playoff stats. Just look at them.
One playoff stat. Wins, baby.
Dude, like,
he doesn't have any of those.
He does have a number. I think he's won more playoff games than he's lost, or he's damn close.
Sorry, AFC Championship wins. Let me be a little bit more specific.
Yeah,
he's never. Look, if we're looking at who's next in the throne, Mahomes, Burrow have gone to that game.
Dude,
to those guys.
I'm going to tell you right now, because I've looked this up. Look at Allen's stats in the playoffs. Look at Burrow's stats in the playoffs. Allen is infinitely better. Allen is like 17 touchdowns to 4 picks, more yards per game. Like, he does everything. It's like, what's the issue? He had no team and lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. He had one of the greatest games ever in the AFC, in the divisional. And then, last year, a bit of a dud against the Bengals. Fine. One bad game, but like, Joe Burrow,
that
his
was
stats.
An emotional game too. Remember that was
with Damar Hamlin.
So like, let's not underestimate all of that. And the rematch against the Bengals, which was the game in which he got. I was in Cincinnati when that happened. That was a very traumatic moment for both cities. So
yeah.
The Bills. Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of that could go to the fact that the Bengals are just a better all-around team, defense-wise, running-wise, which is why Burrow's had to do less, right? Also, speaking of which, did you see the Ravens game the other night? Ravens Redskins? Commanders. Sorry, Washington football team.
Thank you. For everyone at home, I will exclusively refer to them as the football team because I am convinced that is the greatest team name ever. They
fucked that up so hard.
Yeah.
By not being just the Washington football team, tough nose, great colors. Everyone knows who they are. They know why they don't have a name. It's just perfect. Well, DC football needed to embrace that like soccer teams do, where it's just like Liverpool FC or whatever, right?
Just
like city club. Ball.
Just one more thing. Dan Schneider fucked up. Like, just one more thing.
On the way out, we called the Commanders and fucking jerk all over his fan base one last time.
Yeah. I am happy the new ownership is like, new name is on the table, and I really hope they go back to football team.
Dude, I watched. So this was probably the greatest preseason football game I've ever watched. Yeah. Last night, it was Monday night, right? So, Ravens, Redskins. You had the new ownership right there.
Football team. Come on.
Sorry. The Washington football team was playing against my arch nemesis, the Baltimore Ravens. You had the whole hubbubaloo about the new ownership and just. Have you seen the photos of the Redskins 2020 preseason training?
Football team.
2023 football team. Do I keep calling them the Redskins?
God damn it, Rob.
Stick with us, guys. The Commanders and the football team. So the Washington football team, like the amount of fans that were there this year,
Yeah.
it's insane.
It
So there's real buzz around the team. You had the new quarterback, the rookie, as designated starter for the football team.
he's not a
Went out
rookie. Not a rookie, but
not a rookie.
no, he was a 5th round pick in 2022. He's a sophomore. He played one game last year. Sam Howell, yeah.
Red
Yeah,
shirt.
basically a red shirt. But like I mean, I'm not sold on him as a QB, but I do like the football team's team. Like I think they got what outside of quarterback, they got one of the best rosters out there. Their defense is scary. They got a decent offensive line, a great receiving core, running back,
a couple of good running backs. That's a solid. Actually, we'll get to this later, but I think they could win that division. That division up for grabs. We'll maybe a little strong for now.
No.
They beat the Ravens last night. It was wild stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then the Ravens were facing this 24-game, the streak that nobody knew about until last night. 24 straight games, and the Washington football team hadn't won a game since 2009.
Yeah.
Like a preseason game. It's something ridiculous like that.
No, that can't be true. They haven't won a game in preseason since 2000.
Maybe against the Ravens. There was some stat about. Anyways, so you have both sides of it. And so the announcers were there. The players were playing hard. Like, it was a wild preseason game. I've never been that excited ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's hilarious to see. I love how that's now news. But, I mean, let's be real. Preseason matters so little. And the reason I know that is I'm a Lions fan. And the year we went 0-16, we were 4-0 in the preseason. That should tell you everything you need to know. We were. Look it up. The Lions were 4-0.
That would be very Lions-esque as well, to win every preseason game, get the fan base hyped, and then completely shit the bed all season.
Yeah, I can remember. I was like 14, 15 years old at the time, and I was actually getting really excited because there was like a stat that I saw, and it's like, teams that go like 4-0 in the preseason make the playoffs like 80% of the time. And I'm like, oh, nice. Like, the Lions haven't made the playoffs in my lifetime. Finally, we have a shot. And like, no.
That did not last long, did it?
No, it did not. That was, and pretty soon there was just pure sadness.
Yep. The thing is like, there's a lot of tortured fan bases that have something like that. But I will say the preseason does matter. And the reason I think that is because not for the teams in the record and like as a projector of who's going to do well fantasy wise or like performance wise as a team, but for like the individual players. Like, you see these guys out there playing because it's like they get one. There was a running back that was in there. He was a 6th overall pick, and he got the ball for the Washington football team, and he went for like 6 yards and then fumbled. And the other team picked it up and like scooped, didn't score, but went 30 yards the other direction. And that guy went on the sideline, and he was just, you could see it. It was like that was his one chance, 5th, 6th round pick. They put him in the game. He made a good cut, and they said he had one fumble in the last like 2 years at his alma mater. And it's just, so when you see something like that, that's when you realize, no, this does matter to a lot of people.
Oh, to those like later round draft picks, all those things, this matters so much. Like, this is their lives, because this is, are they going to get a paycheck next week? Like, they don't know.
That would suck. That would be like a difficult way to earn a living. I mean, it's a lot of fun. You're doing what you love. It's a great sport. It's a passion. But at the end of the day, like, that would not be a fun experience if you're like a practice squad perimeter level player, which is most.
No. Yeah, which is the majority of the NFL. It's like we hear and talk about those star players, but we don't totally realize that is a very small collection of the NFL that we think of on a daily basis. And most players in here are just scratching and clawing their way to like a 3-year career. And it's like, yeah, they make good money. They make like, $500,000 a year. But imagine like you made that much money, but you have no skills a lot of the time. Like, some of these guys were like,
you didn't get your life through it.
No,
And the average NFL career, I think, is like 3 years long. My good friend David Carter Jr., the vegan NFL lineman, UCLA went and played 2-3 years as like a practice squad, maybe making the team on like 1 or 2 games. Cardinals defensive lineman. So yeah, I made the NFL for about 2 or 3 years, and now has gone on to get a thing. So that's what makes the preseason so special in my mind. I mean, again, I don't. I've watched one preseason game this preseason. It was this one. It was excellent. I loved it. I'm watching a bit more now.
Yeah.
But any other thoughts on the preseason before we move on, Drew? Or on the news and notes before we move on to more bigger narratives from the offseason?
No, I think that's most of the new news. I think most of the fans, if they're coming and listening to this podcast, given it's our first one, they're probably pretty diehard football fans. I think they've heard most of the other things that have gone on. So,
yeah.
So
like the new uniforms dropping, all that good stuff. We will talk about uniforms throughout the year.
Yeah.
Cardinals uniforms, not so hot.
No, I mean, Cardinals and Falcons, I think both have absolutely terrible new uniforms. Rob here is a massive uniform guy. I do like a good uniform, but my thing is I hate over-designed and I hate minimalism. You just got to be somewhere in the middle, and I can get on board.
Yeah, I love the Steelers because they one of my fan pages or whatever I follow. I was very excited that we were introducing a new uniform this year. It was from like 1954 Steelers or some odd year. It looks like every other Steeler uniform ever, just like a slight change in variation on like where the gold be.
See,
which I kind of like, but also it'd be nice to have some flashier stuff. But I do just appreciate it. I like in general how the Pittsburgh franchises. It's one of the few cities where all three leagues color schemes align. So the Pirates, the Penguins, and the Steelers are all black and gold, which is cool. Not a lot of cities do that.
I never actually realized that, but you're 100% right. That's actually really cool.
It's like all year long when you're in Steel Town, whether it's hockey season, baseball season, football season, there's black and gold out and about. It's cool.
No, I like that. I didn't realize that. That's cool. But yeah, so moving on, let's have a conversation about the offseason. Okay, so, I mean,
first things first, we got to pour one out for the GOAT.
Tom Brady. Yep. I mean, I'll be honest, not a fan of Tom Brady as a person. Is he the GOAT? Yes, I acknowledge. Salute, great career. I think there's only one player currently playing who even has a shot at that title, and that's Mahomes. But that's going to...
Outside shot.
Outside shot. I mean, like, I think realistically...
We'll never see anything like it again. That's why I don't give a shit about Tom Brady as a player, as a person, right? Like, Mike Tyson wasn't a good person, but I loved watching him box, right? For me, unfortunately, I recognize that Tiger Woods, probably not a good guy. Hell, even like Barack Obama, most of these people, if you met them, Jordan, these people are assholes. That's how they become so great. It's like they just dominate everything in their way. And so obviously they'll ruffle a couple feathers, but he was the GOAT. Ever since I can remember, Tom Brady's been playing in the NFL.
I think there was an era where that was the case, where it was like that kind of like mean, nasty guy was the kind of like what you needed to be the GOAT.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing anymore. Like, that's not the impression I get from Mahomes, who's like currently the best player. It's a little less, although somewhat with like LeBron. Definitely not with Curry. If you go to
that era of just being the biggest dick in the room is like maybe not. That was
very 90s and early 2000s. I don't totally see that as the case anymore. But I mean, again. Tom Brady, Tom Brady, like 7 championships. I think in order to challenge his GOAT status, you need at least 5. I think 5 is once you hit 5, you can start to. If you have other things going on,
and like in the row, compete. Probably like if you built a dynasty where you just won 5 in a row and then went and faded off in the distance, someone that you could make a contention. But dude went to 10 Super Bowls. That's insane.
Oh, it's nuts. Right? It's nuts. And as I said, but I think 5, if you can win 5, and the reason I say 5 is because it's like, I'll give, if you have a ton of MVPs, like Patrick Mahomes, if he keeps doing what he's doing, where like he has not lost prior to overtime of the AFC Championship game ever. Like
That's
literally.
wild.
Literally, hasn't lost before overtime of the championship game. He's made it to 3 Super Bowls in his 5 seasons as a starter. The 2 times he didn't, he lost in the overtime of AFC Championship game, one of which he didn't even get to touch the football. Like, that is the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, which is why I say, if Patrick Mahomes can go and win 3 more Super Bowls, getting MVP in all those, stack up a couple more MVPs, few more 5,000-yard seasons, even though he's not at the same number of maybe appearances or Super Bowls, he probably also does it in less years than Brady, because Brady was going into his mid-40s. That's when I might say Mahomes is there. But again, we are so far away from that. Patrick Mahomes has a shot, but you're right. It's maybe 10%. Maybe.
It's kind of like the Jordan LeBron conversation a little bit now, where it's like LeBron's at least in it just because of durability, longevity, statistics, has enough rings, has been to the finals enough times, enough MVPs that you could make the argument. Obviously a lot of people might not, or might one way or the other, right? Farewell Tom Brady does feel like a little bit of a new era. In that new era are probably the talk of the offseason of the New York Football Jets. And signing Aaron Rodgers, signing Dalvin Cook. Who else did they bring in?
Brought in Nathaniel Hackett, Alan Lazard, McCole Hardman. I mean, the New York Football Jets, I mean, I think it's hype. I think it's mostly hype. I think that Aaron Rodgers is, let's start here. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is the most talented quarterback in NFL history. Not the greatest, not the GOAT. I think Rodgers is the most talented, Peyton Manning's the greatest, and Brady's the GOAT. That's how I always split it. I think they are different, and I do classify them as such. But Aaron Rodgers is the most talented, but Aaron Rodgers is on, look at last year. He was, pardon?
You said he's on, and I said ayahuasca.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Have you seen his handshake with Sauce Gardner?
I do like that.
Snap up and hit the blunt.
I do like that. No, but Aaron Rodgers is, last year was the worst season of his career. And yes, you could chalk that up to Devontae Adams and Nathaniel Hackett leaving if you want, but I think they still had guys. Alan Lazard was still there. Christian Watson looked pretty good last year. Aaron Jones was still there. They had a pretty solid offensive line. Matt LaFleur was still the head coach and calling the plays. They had a lot of stuff going for him. He had a down year. Yes, there's absolutely a world where he bounces back, is just as good as he was in his MVP seasons, and this is a Super Bowl contending team. I just think it's more likely that he's a middle-of-the-pack quarterback, and we have a lot more hype than is deserved for the Jets.
It's a tough division. Let's not underestimate. You got Josh Allen and the Bills sitting over there. You have Tua and the Dolphins is an exciting and electric team that can steal a couple games.
Never count out Belichick.
And then Bill Belichick and the Pats, who can always steal whatever a game in whatever circumstance. So that's going to be, it reminds me a little AFC North. Internally, they're going to tear each other up a little bit and take a couple L's here and there. And if it's anything like the parallels with the Favre saga, which is remarkably parallel, right? For a quick second, what the fuck? Right?
Incredibly.
Why are they going to the Jets again?
Going to the Jets again after the same number of seasons, after they drafted a first-round QB in the 20s a few years prior, who they're now taking as their starting QB. It's
Hollywood. It's one of those Hollywood couldn't script it.
Now I'm basically just waiting for 15 years from now to find out that Aaron Rodgers has committed fraud with
taxpayer money. Yeah. I thought you meant Jordy Love also going to the New York Jets.
That too, at the same time as Brett Favre committing maybe California, because that's where he's from. California, tax fraud.
Yeah, my old state. Go ahead. I don't pay taxes there anymore. Take away.
But no, yeah. I think it's a good team. They obviously have a great defense.
Wild card at best. I don't even think they win the division. I think it's wild card at best.
Yeah, the Bills are still a better team. It is wild card at best, and the AFC a lot better than the NFC. The AFC East, a lot better than the NFC North. As much as I love my Detroit Lions are the
AFC
third or
shit's
fourth
all
best team
over
in
the
this
NFC.
division.
The
Yeah,
AFC shit's all over the NFC this year, and
Yeah.
most years, to be honest.
most years in
Biggest
recent
winner in the
history.
whole Jet saga, though, is G-Dub entering his second year, going from having Wilson and White chucking him the ball into double coverage into actually having a competent quarterback and other threats. Like, talk about
Yeah.
anyone that wants a sleeper for their fantasy teams. That
Oh,
kid is. I had him last year. I picked him up on a flyer, and he was phenomenal. I almost started him over Najee Harrison the last week of the season.
dude,
He's that good down the stretch, and that was with nobodies.
he's incredibly talented. Like he's going to be a great wide receiver. And obviously Aaron Rodgers, even if he's not the Aaron Rodgers of old, he's still going to be an improvement over Wilson and White.
The MILF Cougar, the MILF Hunter himself.
Oh, baby. It's not a MILF hunter when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. He'd be trying to date Aaron Rodgers' girlfriend or sister. That's about the age range he looks at.
Yeah, Zach Wilson would be fucking Aaron Rodgers' mom.
No, I'm saying Zach Wilson would be fucking Aaron Rodgers' girlfriend because that would be the equivalent of a mom to Zach Wilson.
The age that Aaron's coming in at. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I would say the other real big storyline is probably, in my mind, it's got to be the Eagles, right? You always have the Super Bowl loser, hangover year. You have the departure of both offensive and defensive coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jalen Hurts the real deal, or was that a fluky season? There's a lot of question marks in that team.
I think there's a lot of question marks in that team. I still really like them. I mean, they've lost some guys, but they still got a phenomenal offensive line. They still got two great receivers, some really good pieces on that defense, and a good leadership core. I still like them, but I think they're the second best team in the NFC. That being said, I think they were the second best team in the NFC last year. It's just that when they played the 49ers in the championship game, Christian McCaffrey was their quarterback.
That was a shame, because that whole weekend was great games, and that was going to be another good one, and everyone wanted to see Brock Purdy. How can you be better than Tom Brady? There's only one person that'll be better than Tom Brady. It's Brock Purdy. It's to be drafted Mr. Irrelevant, even further than Tom Brady, the legendary, 352nd draft pick or whatever.
199, I believe. 199.
199, right, where you can name every quarterback and all that before him. How do you out Brady? You be Mr. Irrelevant and go never lose, come in as a rookie, win. Like that, the NFL films crew was salivating over that storyline. So that was a goddamn thing.
Has he lost a game he's played the whole game?
Not since high school.
Yeah.
He's like AJ McCarron. Remember when AJ McCarron hadn't lost in 7 years?
Yeah. But that's wild that Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, comes in and didn't lose a game last year. And I mean, they talk about it's obviously he's the starter. I'm happy they're making him the starter. I know that was debated whether he would be the starter this year. I'm like, he earned it. He earned it. That being said,
go and win in clutch situations when you've had no first round reps. Come on.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Trey Lance?
It never hurts to have a couple backup quarterbacks. They did trade the farm for him, but they seem to have a solid enough. I say let him sit there and let him keep Brock Purdy on his toes. I don't see have Brock be the starter, have Trey and Darnold lighting a fire under his ass, and have some depth. If there's a team that's needed depth, it's been the Niners. They've had a rash of injuries on both sides of the line for several years now.
Yeah.
So I just sit on them. I think people get too caught up in this hype of perform, play, or move them, and especially when you've leveraged as many picks as they did to get him.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think that's the best option. I think that's where they are going to go forward. Just to circle back quickly on the Eagles, I think their best advantage, I think the Niners, I'll agree with you, are probably the best team in the league, in the NFC. And then it's the Eagles, and that's their advantage, is that the rest of the NFC is pretty shit.
Yeah.
So there's no reason in my mind that they'll regress, because it's who's taking the throne? I'm not afraid of Atlanta. I'm not afraid of your Detroit Lions. I'm not
Yeah,
afraid of the Seahawks, maybe. Like, who's scaring you in the
because
NFC?
realistically, after the Eagles, probably third best Dallas Cowboys. That's not a
Oh,
scary team. And fourth best, I think odds, like literal Vegas odds, is Detroit Lions. And I'm a Lions fan. I love the Lions. I don't think we're Super Bowl contenders yet. I think we
that's
are
good.
playoff contenders. We could get a win, but we're not Super Bowl contenders, in my
How are
opinion.
we even having this conversation? Is that how bad the NFC is? And then when you look at the AFC and you think like the Jags, are they even going to make the playoffs? Right? You look at
Well,
the talent and just like the
the
depth.
Jags will because they're in the AFC South.
Yeah, well, that'll just be a product of, but like at the expense of one of the AFC North teams, which could be some heavy hitters. The Browns aren't an easy out. The Bengals could be the best team in the AFC. My Steelers are always frisky, and let's not forget Lamar Jackson coming back to a star-studded Ravens.
Yeah,
And so that's just one division in the AFC. I like all four of those teams over anybody outside of the Eagles and the Niners in the NFC.
literally outside of the AFC South, which has like a bunch of rookie QBs. They literally three of the top four rookie QBs went to the AFC South.
Right.
Um, but like outside of the AFC South, you literally have every team thinks they'll compete. I think the worst of them is the Raiders, but the fact is the Raiders are probably the fourth worst team in the AFC and would
I
be
think the
fighting for.
Broncos and Raiders are probably equivalently. Like, I'm not
They,
buying the Peyton thing yet. I need to see.
I
We'll
get
get there.
it, but I give the Broncos a little more credit just because I'm like, I don't. What we've seen with Sean Payton, what we've seen with Russell Wilson. I don't think this is the worst offense in the league, and if you bounce back a little bit with how good that defense is, it's a good team. They went 5-12 with the worst offense in the league. Mediocre offense, they're a 500 team, but like these teams would be playoff contenders in the NFC, and they're not even in the conversation in the AFC.
Yeah, it's a wild disparity. It's like when the East and West in the NBA about a decade back, when that was also just 8 teams that would slaughter anyone else that stepped
Oh,
up on the other side.
absolutely. And for anyone listening, you'll hear us make a lot of basketball references because Rob and I are both diehard football fans and diehard basketball fans. So you're going to hear a lot of us comparing things to NBA. So we hope you love both.
Yeah, yeah. He played football last year at school. I played basketball, so this is something that will cross pollinate from time to time, and eventually throw out all other sports. We pretty much are sports aficionados across the board. I've lived overseas for decades, so I've actually started to fancy some of these random ones too. So just be careful if you hear a cricket reference from time to time.
We're not we're not talking cricket, guys. I promise
No,
you.
never.
If he tries to talk cricket, I will stop it. I promise.
Yeah, even I will. Even I will do cricket.
But yeah, yeah. One thing I think moving on, that's a lot of the off-season things. One thing that's really important from the off-season though is the draft. I just want to know like any like initial thoughts from the draft, anything that you thought was like really interesting, exciting?
The Steelers not blowing it as usual. That's always a good. Like, it's just so we're just so good and consistent at the draft. I do think it's between us and maybe the Ravens and one or two other teams that like just draft so lights out every year.
Dude, the
Um,
best drafting team, and I don't like them as a team, but the best drafting team's the Seattle Seahawks. The
yeah,
amount
they've done pretty well. I hate Pete Carroll, USC.
I
But
understand it. I'm not a Seahawks fan. I get it. I all that, but credit where credit's due. I can't think of a bad draft that they've had. Every time they draft a guy,
yeah, it's true. They hit some home runs.
yeah.
Overall, what I think I liked the most about this draft was just how much it didn't go to chalk. Right? It's like you have Mel Kiper and the other one, and they go out there and they talk about who are the two? It's Mel Kipe and
Oh, I don't even know. There's a lot of them, but yeah, I know who you're talking about.
yeah, it's the two of them. They always come on draft time, and so they like after the third pick, it just nobody knew. It just I don't know if everyone's dumb, if the NFL teams are dumb. I think Brock Purdy proves that nobody knows anything still.
No, and I think at the end of the day, like what it is we get so like we get so hyper focused on what Mel Kiper's ranks are that we're not actually listening to or not actually thinking about what that team might be wanting.
Yeah.
Because and I think that's the problem is, and every mock draft, everything bases it off of what these couple of people in the media think it's going to be.
Right.
And what we think the team needs are, and then we basically say, here's like a big board, and here's where we place them. The problem is that's one of 33 big boards, and each of the 32 teams have their own big board that we're not looking at.
Yeah, that'd be a cool ass job, or even just a cool experience to be a fly on the wall for one of those seasons, to watch that process, to just see how these franchises think, and to be able to hop across franchises and just see how, like, sit in the Steelers room one day and then go to the Arizona Cardinals room and just, or the Cleveland Browns, let's say, and just see the dumpster fire that is like the Cleveland War Room.
Yeah, Cleveland Browns War Room. Can this quarterback play football? Yes. Okay, cross them off. Have they been to prison? Yes. I'll move them to the top of our list.
Yeah. Do they consume tons of alcohol and no film?
Yeah. Like, what's their film to alcohol ratio? That's the biggest thing in the Cleveland Browns War Room.
Yeah, for sure. So, and then also just the idea of, like, the draft itself being a very strange concept for getting a job. We just came out of a business school program where there was a couple odd, like, structured hiring sort of deals, or like you get recruited this way or that way. The idea that you would go into, like, a room on national television in New York City somewhere, and all these, like, potential employers walk up and say whether or not they select you is, like, it's just a mind-boggling experience, I imagine.
Like, that's a great comment that I don't think's talked about enough. I mean, obviously, yes, these guys make a ton of money, and so there are things that come in exchange for that money. But just imagine that. Like, think about you and your job today. It's like, we have the option to go and move to another job at any point in time. It's like,
in another
city, we can be like, I want to live close to home. It's like, they're literally like, if you want to play in the NFL, you got to spend at least like 4 or 5 years here in this city, or you don't play in the NFL. And then we could franchise tag you. And it's like, that is wild.
Marshawn Lynch talks about this, how he went and got drafted. You know, he spent his whole life in the Bay, and then he goes to Buffalo in upstate New York. Dude didn't even know where it was on a map. He thought it was New York City when he got drafted. And then he gets shipped off to obvious, right? America's treasure, Marshawn Lynch. But right, then you get to Buffalo, and you're right. It's just like the difference between sitting there, and if you go 15th, you get paid $20 million and you go to Miami, versus getting picked 28th and you make $2 million and you go to Arizona and you're in the desert. And you're just like, it's like, that's an insane way to get a job.
Yeah, and it's why you see, like, the NFL hasn't quite gotten to this level, but, like, I think it's why you see a lot of these NBA players wanting to move to the big markets. It's because they're like, I don't want to live in fucking Utah.
Milwaukee. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like Giannis, like, yeah, he's just happy to be there.
Yeah, he's happy to be there. Like, he's from a small, like, for me, like, I grew up in a town of like 1,000, 2,000 people. I don't need to live in a big city. But if you're like, and especially in the NBA, and I think this is why you see it, NBA basketball is much bigger in urban cultures. Football is much more of a small town game.
Yeah.
And so I think you see a lot more of these football players are totally comfortable and content being in these smaller towns, smaller cities.
Indianapolis.
Yeah, Indianapolis, like Kansas City. A lot of people want to go there. Like, what the fuck's in Kansas City?
Missouri.
Yeah. But it's like, in the NBA, you do have a lot of people from cities. And that's why they want to be in the big cities. Like, they don't want to be in these like random places like Utah, Milwaukee, like
Carolina.
All these Carolina. Yeah.
So my hot take, though, just last one on the draft. I think Richardson has a better career than Young.
Dude, I mean, Anthony Richardson athletically is an absolute freak. But
have you seen tape on that kid?
My worry is that he's going to turn out like Justin Fields. Like, the goal is he's closer to like a Cam Newton, a Lamar Jackson, a Mike Vick, a young like rookie RG3, where it's like great running quarterback, but he's also got the ability to pass. The thing with Justin Fields, and you know this, but for the audience, I am not a Justin Fields fan. I think Lamar Jackson, I think running quarterbacks can be exceptionally talented, but Justin Fields has not shown me the ability to pass. Lamar Jackson, we joke about him being a running back. Yeah, Lamar Jackson, we joke about being a running back, but he's thrown for over 3,000 yards. He's thrown for over 30 touchdowns in a season. Like, Justin Fields threw for less than 150 yards per game. Like, he was a pure runner. Like, and that's my worry with that.
We'll see. We'll see what happens there. Any other thoughts on the draft?
I mean that's a lot of it. I think the big thing is going to be what happens with the Houston Texans. Like, they made that big trade up for that third pick.
Yeah.
But like, they're not a team in win now. They're in the incredibly competitive AFC, and they don't have a first round pick next year.
Yeah, that could be a huge mistake. I like the Rams. They got like 11 or 12 picks. They just needed some depth. So I think they had a pretty solid draft. I did think a couple of teams. I thought the Jags kind of shit the bed, to be honest. Not surprising, but they needed more for Trevor, and they didn't get it to him.
I think they got weapons for Trevor. Like, I think they got Calvin Ridley coming back.
No, that's not in the draft though.
It's not in the draft, but I'm like, what weapon? Like, they have Calvin Ridley coming back. They have Christian Kirk. They have Travis Etienne. It's like, I'm like, and who was the tight end that they had? Who was actually Evan Ingram? It's like, they have solid weapons. I'm not saying they have a superstar. Calvin Ridley could be.
I would say more along the lines of an offensive line.
That's fair. That's fair.
And a defensive secondary that can stop teams.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see the improvement that I thought they needed. When I said help Trevor Lawrence, I didn't necessarily mean on the offensive side of the ball in the skill position.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
I just think as a franchise and a team that needed to be building a super strong core for the next 4 or 5 years to compete in that AFC, they got to be making picks like in these drafts now, or he's gone in 3 years. Again, talk about players wanting to go to different markets. Nobody wants to play in Jacksonville.
No one wants to play in Jacksonville. And like Trevor Lawrence, I mean, think about how big a star he was in college. Could you imagine him in a major market? Could you imagine him on like the New York Giants or
that hair? Oh,
like this guy's should be one of the most marketable people in the league, but unless he moves to a big market, because kind of Mahomes kind of owns that like overarching I'm really good at football market.
He's the Curry. Yeah, he's got the Curry market.
Exactly.
So it's like casual fan, like some random dude on a little street corner in Singapore kind of fame.
Exactly. So he's got to move to a big market, and it doesn't even need to be a big team. Like Josh Allen does fine in Buffalo because Buffalo, while not a big overall market, that's a massive football market.
No, okay, I got to correct you a little bit. The reason Pat Mahomes is who he is isn't because of Kansas City. It's because he went and won. So if Trevor goes and wins, and he can become that out of Jacksonville too. That's different, I would say, than.
I don't know, because Patrick Mahomes won, but I think Patrick Mahomes, like, there's other quarterbacks who've won, like Matt Stafford won in LA, a massive market, and still like never got.
He's a pretty boring guy.
Yeah, so I think
I don't know what it is. Yeah, he's just not. Yeah. So in that way, right?
I think it's winning helps, but I think what Patrick Mahomes is just like it's that being a nice, likable personality who's the
he's
best.
Got the Curry thing too.
The Curry thing, like another guy who was there, Peyton Manning. That was Peyton Manning back in the day, like the kind of like lovable goofball who's really good. Like even before Peyton Manning won, he was there.
And you also, they're mixed race kids too, so you get both sides of the aisle a little bit. So you can't underrate the marketability of kind of reaching across the color lines in the league, right? So you're not polarizing in an increasingly polarized world. But really, what it comes down to for both of those guys is winning, and winning with class and style, and not being a distraction off the field, right? Those are all the reasons why those guys have become, those guys being Mahomes and Curry, kind of the respective face of the franchise of the leagues.
Exactly. But yeah, I think that's a good conversation and a good draft recap. We're running near the end of the episode, but want to quickly move into one segment that we have, which is our best bets with Bookie Bob. So why don't
Indeed.
you why don't you talk to the people what this segment's all about?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick it off. So, as Drew knows, and most of my friends and family know, I am what they call a degenerate gambler. Not necessarily a grandpa needs a new pair of shoes down to the wire, but more like betting $1 on the second league of the Israeli soccer division because that team hasn't won a game in 23 games. And I'll make my 20 cents off my dollar. That kind of thing. So, across the world, I have been known as Bookie Bob. And so I'm very thrilled and excited to bring the best bets with Bookie Bob Corner to our podcast. So at the end of every chat, we will have a segment where we look at the odds, we place some bets, and we will have a running competition throughout the year to see who is the best gambler, aka the most knowledgeable about the National Football League. Because at the end of the day, what's great about sports betting is you called it, my friend, and nobody can tell you otherwise because you got the receipts. And I think at the end of the day, that's why I really love sports betting in general. It's kind of calling your shot, making a little money. And of course, when you're betting on some random game like, the Lions and the Jags that nobody cares about,
Hey.
you throw a couple of dollars on it, and all of a sudden it matters. I think fantasy football has a very similar draw in that sense.
So
ahead,
when we make the betting, just for everyone to know, Rob's going to be very much so bet with his heart. I'm going to be very much so bet using stats and analytics. And at the end of the day, it's going to be 50-50 who wins.
Yeah, it's actually a great example of that is me and a buddy of mine. I'm always like, we watched Thanksgiving football together in Kenya once. And I was like, look, you bet on the Cowboys to win and the Lions to lose because it's Thanksgiving Turkey Day. And that's what happens. The Cowboys win and the Lions lose. And he was like, is that true? And he went and looked at the historical record and found out that no, it's pretty much a coin flip. If you do that, you would have won 48% or 52. It's statistically insignificant. And my response was, no, yeah, that's not how it works. The Lions lose on Thanksgiving and the Cowboys win. So yeah, I do have a lot of those hunches. I generally try to leave the Steelers out of it just because I do have too much heart in the play. But for the most part, I try to be as logical as possible besides those couple of panache picks there.
Yeah. So for this Bookie Bob segment, though, not going to go into too much, but we're going to talk about who we'd like to win the Super Bowl. Now, this is not necessarily our Super Bowl favorite. This is whose odds we like the most to win the Super Bowl. Who do we think pays the best return for their chances to win? So, Rob, who do you think that is?
Pick. And my value pick is a little bit of heart. I'm not going to lie, but every pick of mine is a little bit of heart. But there's also, I think, the right combination of chemistry and timing and legacy on this team.
If you say the Steelers with Kenny Pickett, no one's going to trust you. Okay.
Not yet. I would say in probably a more future year than people would expect. It'll come. But this year I'm going across the river and picking the Cincinnati Bengals at plus 1,100 to win the Super Bowl.
Are they plus 1,100? That's okay.
That's what I was looking at. So I think just value wise, that's just confirming that as of today, of the time of filming, which is Tuesday, the 22nd of August, 2023. I like 11x for my boys in the black and orange. I have a thing when it comes to people like Corey Gauff, who's a female tennis player who was in the league at 16. Mahomes was a good example last year when he was an underdog. You want to pick these teams when these guys are up and coming. They haven't won yet, but you're betting on them to become the next big thing. And Joe Cool, I have him as my MVP pick, which we'll get to later, and I also have him going to the Super Bowl and winning it. So I'm all for it. But Mom, you heard it here first. Your Cincinnati Bengals are going to be the National Football League champions in 2022, 2023, 24.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are pretty good odds for the Bengals. They've already been to the Super Bowl. They look like a better team than when they did go. I think the reason you're getting those odds is they're in that really tough AFC. They probably aren't going to get the top seed because you have to assume that's going to the Chiefs, which means good chance they got to run the gauntlet of probably Buffalo and the Chiefs just to get to the big dance.
Right.
I think that's what's being baked into those odds.
Yeah.
Which is honestly what really informs my bet, which is I got at plus 1,000, so 10x the San Francisco 49ers. And it's a lot because I think their path to the big game is pretty smooth sailing. I mean, we saw how many players and how many injuries they even had last year, and they were still in the NFC Championship game. And barring Brock Purdy getting injured, I think they likely get there. They're the same team, maybe even better, when the Eagles have lost some guys. And if they're able to have the home field advantage, which I don't think is an unreasonable to happen for them, given how they finished last season with Brock Purdy, this is a team I really like. I think they have an easy road there, and I think really maybe 2 tough games in the playoffs is what they're going to see. And at plus 1,000, when I think they can compete in any of those games, I think that's great odds.
Yeah, that really is good odds to essentially shave 1 degree down without the gauntlet that you mentioned. That's my Joe Burrow kind of bet. And if he doesn't do it this year, then I'm putting him kind of in Josh Allen on the ice territory until he wins one, and then I can maybe bring him back. But I think you make some really good points on the Niners. We already talked about the regression potential for the Eagles. I still think that's a tough out, but they're the road to home field advantage. Having a full season of Brock Purdy, hopefully having a full season of CMC, having an off season which they can develop plays and kind of tweak a playbook a little bit around those guys. They have some depth at quarterback, so if something were to happen, it's not a crapshoot of a season for them.
Yeah.
And let's not forget they went to the Super Bowl not too long ago. Was that 4
Yeah.
or 5 years ago against the Chiefs? I think it was maybe 4 now.
4-ish years ago. They were in the NFC Championship game last year.
And it's not quite the same team, but you do have a lot of solid line that's still there. And I agree. I think the biggest caveat is those odds with that clear of a path. You're not throwing you didn't even mention Lamar Jackson in his own the own division could be a tough win for the Bengals, whereas the Niners really only have the Seahawks. The Rams could be they're in the toughest division probably in the NFC.
I think second toughest. I'd give it to the NFC East, Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, football team.
Strong enough. Yeah. Okay, East. Because the Redskins, the Washington football team we've already talked about. Danny Dimes and whatnot.
Yeah. But either way, it's still the Cardinals probably the worst team in the league in their division. The Rams traded away basically their entire defense minus Aaron Donald. The Seahawks are decent, but it's you're still trusting Geno Smith for that team to be good, which I'm still not sold on long term. And then and then you got a weak overall NFC anyway, so yeah, that's my take. I think that the 49ers got the best odds there.
So Bookie Bob's putting it down into the books. We have at plus 1,000. One other thing. So we'll have sort of 2 running kind of pools throughout the year. So we'll have a regular season bets. So every week we'll kind of look at bets. But we're also putting, as part of this challenge I mentioned, so against each other, $100 of our real hard-earned cash money into the preseason. So we get $100, and again, we have about 3 more of these podcasts before the season kicks off. And we'll have a Bookie Bob Corner best bets. So knowing that, you have $100 for the preseason. So these are all our future bets, right? How much are you wagering on your 10x Niners to win the Super Bowl bet?
I really like this one. I'm big on the Niners. I'm going to play a little bit aggressive in this, knowing that there's a bunch I want to do. In this, I'm going to go with $20, which is a pretty significant portion of my bet onto this.
I also was going $20. It's just that, again, this is back to kind of the heart thing for me, where it's you put $20 on the Super Bowl champ. right?
Yeah.
There might be better bets out there. There might be more savvy logic, venture capital, private equity type of plays. But you know what, buddy? I put $20 on my Super Bowl pick every year, and this is no different. Let's go Cincinnati Bengals at 11x for $20. With
Yeah.
a chance to win, that would be $220. So I would clear $200, and you would clear
I would get to
100.
200. Yeah. I would get to
Yeah.
200. Yeah.
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 So you get 180. So profit. So I get a little bit more profit if mine hits. Pretty much, if you're picking a Super Bowl winner, you're gonna probably win the pool.
Yeah. If you pick it right, it's going to be tough to come back. But you get a good enough bet with an MVP. You get a good enough bet with a depoy. You got a shot.
All right, we'll come back next week to the best bets with Bookie Bob as we continue to lay our money on the line to see who is the best degenerate gambler on this podcast.
Yeah, well, with that, I think that's it for the end of our first episode. For any of you who made it to the end of this episode, thank you so much for listening. Please follow, subscribe, leave a comment. We'd love to go through this NFL season with you and let us know what we can do to make this show better for you. Because again, we like doing it for ourselves, but we want you to be a part of this show too. And we hope to have you along for the ride.
Yep, we're learning as we go. We want to interact with you as the fans. So come on down, take a listen, and send some comments and some likes. And see you next year. See you next week and throughout the year.
Yes, we are going to be back on next week, not next year, Rob.